Right. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Can you tell us like a little bit about who you are, where you live, like who you are as a person, maybe that we wouldn't read in your bio?
Yeah. So I'm originally from the state of Maine. I'm currently living in Jacksonville, Florida. But
Yeah.
over the course of 10 years, my husband and two kids have kind of slowly migrated down the East Coast. So we started in Maine, moved to Long Island, New York, Richmond, Virginia, and inevitably ended up here in Florida. So
Ah.
my background is like, and hobbies are really mountain based and woods, and I love to be in nature. And so when I moved to Florida, I was like,
Oh.
this is incredibly flat and hot. What am I doing here? But fast forward a couple of years, it's grown on
Uh-huh.
me, and it's actually a really great place to live. And then we vacation in all the other places that,
There
you
you
know, fill my cup.
go.
Uh,
I'm thinking of some friends I need to connect you with if you like, yeah, like do you like hiking and stuff like that or
so
backpack?
I grew up doing it from a really young age, climbing, backpacking, all of that stuff. And so
Uh-huh.
when I did move to Florida, I was like, there's none of this here. Because there really is.
Yeah.
There's like nature walks and paths,
Yes,
things
but
like
not,
that.
there's no mountains. There's no, yeah.
So we do tend to take our vacations in those other areas. So you
Uh-huh.
get yin and yang of both places. So
Yeah.
it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
I've been in the wellness, nutrition, yoga world for close to 20 years. And I've been a yoga practitioner right out of high school into college. I traveled to India. I was there for 6 months where I studied Ayurvedic
Wow.
nutrition, and I studied yoga and sustainable agriculture. And that really is where I feel like was the catalyst that took me into the field of more functional and natural approach to treatment.
Yes.
Just given the culture and given how much time I spent there and what I learned.
Mhm.
And I was really fortunate to be able to travel to different countries and see a lot of resources they had or in fact didn't have, and
Mhm.
how lucky we were in the States, and wanted to bring something back here to give a different approach to treatment, right?
Mhm.
Because I think I've been in traditional medicine, I've treated in traditional medicine, which I know you have as well, Lori. But when it comes down to it, I felt like there were so many big gaps, and we were treating in such a box that it was missing treating the problems, and it was missing, people were being kind of overlooked,
Mm.
normalized, and when things needed to be addressed further.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hence where I'm at now, where fast forward, I'm treating women, primarily women, but I do see men on a more of a performance basis, but
Okay. Like
um,
athletes that are looking
athletes,
to
things like,
improve their
especially men that
performance.
want to perform higher and more endurance and strength, testosterone based performance.
Got it.
But really, I have migrated into women's health and a more functional medicine approach paired with
Mhm.
my dietetic background.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Uh-huh. And tell me a little bit about like, so how, so that's how you migrated there. So what does your day-to-day look like? Like who are the types of clients that you're working with and like what, give us a visual. What might you
Sure.
be helping them with?
Sure. So demographic, if we're talking women, is typically
Mm.
from the ages of 30 to postmenopausal, right?
Okay.
I'm
Mhm.
seeing women usually that have either are trying to get pregnant or have already had children and
Okay.
have these big influxes in their hormones, and
Mhm.
they're not feeling the way they once did in their 20s. And especially when you start to hit the high, like the upper age of 30 into low 40s, you're seeing this big shift
Mhm.
in not only their health, but also their mental health. And, if you look at the definition of health, it's like the absence of disease, right? Which I feel like is such a circular definition. It doesn't give us much depth of actually what health is, because
Mhm.
quite frankly, you and I could have tons of symptoms
Mhm.
of whatever it be, like fatigue, energy loss, libido loss, acne, hair falling out, whatever. The list goes on, right? But when labs come back normal, quote unquote normal,
Mhm.
and we're not diagnosed with anything. So
Mhm.
therefore, we are thought in conventional terms to be healthy,
Mhm.
but we don't feel healthy.
Yeah.
And a lot of women will ignore those symptoms and just say, well, there's nothing going on. Or some women are made to feel like there's something wrong with them,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Like it must be me. I have a mental health issue. I'm weak. I can't do this on my own. Why can other women do this and I can't? Or I'm struggling every day. And so it's really in what I do is I shed light on normalizing the really unsexy feelings, right?
Mm.
Because in all reality, we are all on a similar walk of life, and we all have symptoms, we all have feelings, we all have moments of imperfection that need to be highlighted in a way it is normal. It is normal
Mhm.
not to go through these changes in our hormones and not to feel our best, but there are ways to dig in and fix and balance, right? And
Mhm.
those are what's not taught to us, whether it's when we're in school or whether we are seeing our primary care, our OBGYN. Those are not necessarily discussed in a lot of traditional medicine practices.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love how you said normalizing the unsexy feelings. Yeah. Do you think it's like this expectation of I should feel good all the time, and so if I don't, then there's something like
I think that's a
something
part of it,
wrong?
but also I think there's so much influence,
Mhm.
whether it be from social media, from our families, from our friends, from our providers, that almost they don't give us the room to feel anything other than how we are supposed to feel or
Mm.
textbook should feel. Because if there's nothing wrong with us, then it must be all in our head. And I
Mm.
have heard from so many of my patients that they legitimately feel like there's something mentally wrong with them. Like
Mhm.
they're supposed to fix it. Like they should be strong enough to solve the problem. But when
Yeah.
all actuality, these are the symptoms, and the problems are not being addressed. The problems are not being talked about enough or educated about. And I just got off a phone call yesterday, and a woman was like, she just had her second child, 6 months old is her youngest, and she's really
Mm.
struggling. She turned 40 this year, and her husband works full time. She's a nurse practitioner, and she genuinely feels mean and angry a lot of the time.
Mm.
And on top of those feelings, she has an immense amount of guilt because
Mhm.
of how she's treating the people in her life that she loves.
Yeah.
So taking a patient like that and normalizing it in the sense that there's no judgment on yourself, there should be no judgment on yourself, and that there are so many women that feel the way that you feel and don't talk about it,
Mhm.
and really starting at baseline with those patients and having them address behavior change, labs, and just some of the normal day-to-day behaviors to bring awareness to their feelings, right? Because
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing that I think
Yeah.
people don't do enough is say, I feel angry or
Yeah.
I feel frustrated, because
Mhm.
we all feel that way. And just because
Mhm.
my background and foundation with patients is helping with mental health or behavior change, that doesn't mean that I've solved all my problems. Right.
Mhm.
Like I have
Yeah.
moments and I'm human, but I think throughout the years of me being so intentional and researching and knowing the
Mhm.
literature, that I've developed tools that help me function
Mhm.
when I'm in certain parts of my cycle that make it harder to be
Yeah.
patient or feel happy or not anxious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm just thinking of this on a personal level too. So my daughter is 10 months. So I've been nursing her. And what's typical for me, and this happened with my son, is I didn't have a cycle till about 8 months in, initially after postpartum, but then for me, because of breastfeeding, I don't have them. Well, I had one, and I just don't know where I'm at. Like, I'm not having them regularly yet. But I'm in like this business coaching community, and I had like kind of freaked out like a week or two ago, just like, I don't know about this. Da, 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 da. And I remember her, and then I freaked out about like something else too. We were on a call, and I made a comment, and I was like, oh my gosh, did I offend this woman? Because I had this like sales call with a woman in my community, that's like a colleague, but then anyways, but she was like, you're kind of, are you like overall anxious right now? And like, I looked at it and I was like, I think I'm in my luteal phase and I didn't even realize it, and it's like, I do this and even just recognizing, those things in yourself. Yeah. That it's not, I don't have it all together and I don't have like, perfect hormones and perfect, mental clarity all the time.
No, and I don't think that should be the goal, right? I don't think perfection is ever the goal for any of us, men, women, children, none of us. I don't think perfection should be the goal. But it is funny that you say like, oh, I'm in my luteal phase, because there are moments I'm in my home and my husband knows this is my practice. This is how I educate most women. And he knows a lot about my cycle and just educate, like, knowing if I'm in my luteal phase, because I make a PSA, public service announcement in my home. I'm feeling a little impatient the next few days. I'm on my luteal phase and my daughter's 10. So like, she's like, what's your luteal phase? But
now she's going to be more prepared.
Well, and this is why I kind of brought this up, is that, and this can come up in now or in a later discussion, but educating our young girls on what's happening with their bodies. And so they are aware, because I told her there's going to be times when you start your period and leading up to that you're not going to want to talk to mom and dad, and that you're going to feel more isolated, or you're going to feel like you want to be by yourself, or you're more irritated with all of us. And those are times that you need to recognize that you might need to spend some more alone time. Go in your room for a little while.
Oh, wow. That's so great. I mean, it's so, yes, I was not taught any of that stuff. And I remember feeling so, I can look back and like remember times where I'm like crying to my mom, and I'm just like, I don't understand why I'm so emotional,
I know. And there are times even with my 10-year-old that she'll cry, but tell me she doesn't know why she's crying. And she's in that preteen era where she's not fully hormonal yet, but things are starting to happen with her body. And so, and I will just tell her, I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's fine. And sometimes it goes true with ourselves as well, Lori, is sometimes sitting with the feeling, right? Which is really tough to do, especially if you have anxiety already, or you have like an OCD personality, or you're a Hickser, type A, very logical. Like, this is very tough for my patients to do, when I just say you have to sit with that feeling, because people want to fix, they want it to go away. They don't want to feel in a way that isn't pleasant. So there's a lot going on when people are feeling like, let's talk women for a second, when they're feeling anxious and depressed. Now, you might have natural tendencies to feel that way, right? And then you have to add on, let's say, a hormonal imbalance. And there are 3 main hormones. And I know you're super lingual with this because you practice this way as well, but looking at cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, right? Those are kind of like the 3 mothership hormones that I talk a lot about with my women. And there is so much about those 3 hormones that women don't understand and have not been educated on. And everyone's heard estrogen, right? And so like everyone knows about that, but do they know the depth of the importance of that hormone, right? So estradiol being kind of that hormone that makes us feel happy. It's our mood boosting or alternate if it's in excess, right? So too much of estrogen can actually be super harmful for us. And just the right amount kind of is that groovy feeling where it travels to your brain and it helps you regulate serotonin, which is that happy hormone, or dopamine. So if you don't have enough dopamine and that dopamine is that hormone that kind of creates the either high highs or low lows, that depressive feeling or anxious feeling too. So when that's not balanced, you're going to tend to have more anxiety or depressive feelings as well. And I think understanding the importance of having balanced estrogen for women is key for them to understand their bodies and understand their mood and control their PMS symptoms or their anxiety. And that's really the foundation for women, is understanding these big hormones.
Yeah. That's so good. Oh my gosh. I feel like you and I could just sit here and shop talk.
Run the world. We're gonna run the world.
Yes. So I want to go back of, I'm just thinking if a woman, right, they're hearing what you're saying and it's resonating of like, you were talking about your clients that just feeling very angry and feeling like, what is kind of a process of like, I'm sure there's some education piece that has to happen, when you first start talking with somebody of like, this is what's going on in your body, and kind of, I guess, take us through, if somebody identifies with what you just said and it's like, yeah, that's me too. What does it look like of what's initial understanding that they have to, come to, and then how might you work with somebody and move them where they're in a better place, with their hormones?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when a woman comes to me explaining some of these feelings we just talked about, we start very baseline, Lori.
Mm-hmm.
Like we start to look at an assessment piece and the symptoms they're having, how often they have them, how intense they are. We really, really drive, like really dig into the details of their day-to-day and start to understand when they have the high highs and low lows. We find, I talk to them about if they're having a normal cycle and if they're still cycling, that when is it that you are bleeding? When is your menstrual cycle? And we start to look at educating them on the 4 weeks of that monthly cycle. And then we put the two symptoms and their monthly cycle together. And sometimes there's this like ding, 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 like you are super anxious in this like 10 to 14 day luteal cycle, right? Yeah. Like you're starting to feel your progesterone rise, and then estrogen rise. And there's just kind of this host of really big PMS symptoms. Some women have these symptoms all month though.
Yeah.
They're not these high highs.
It's not cyclical.
Right. And so from that point, we start talking about behavior change and looking at ways to identify the feelings. So with nutrition counseling, you really have to start looking at the symptoms they're having, creating a rapport with the people. So understanding like where they're coming from, their walks of life. And sometimes they need time to discuss things that have happened in the past that have resulted in why they feel the way they do today. And as a practitioner, understanding that not everything is black and white and there's a lot of gray, and not treating patients like within that box is really important. So understanding where the patient's coming from and then making changes and giving them tips in order to recognize their feelings. And ways that we do this and in my practice is that the patient and we talk about, I call it the box. So when you're in the box, it's kind of when you get this feeling of the sky or the ceiling crushing you, and you can't see outside of any of your anger, your fear, your anxiety, your tears, whatever it might be, whatever emotion you're feeling. If that's all you're feeling, that is what I call being in the box.
Yeah.
We start to work on identifying that, right? Like, okay, I'm feeling really terrible right now. What am I feeling? And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I feel so angry at everybody that I love in my life for no reason. Because sometimes that is the case.
Yeah.
We just feel angry and can't explain why. So the second that people identify that emotion of whatever it is that they're in the box with, they immediately find themselves outside the box, Lori. So looking in on themselves, that's kind of the idea of being like, what's happening right now? What's happening to me? From that point, we develop kind of like this mantra, right? Like find 1 to 3 or 4 words that resonate with you. I am enough. I can get through this. This is okay. I can feel this way.
Yeah.
This won't last forever. Whatever mantra that is, and it has to be individualized to the person, right? To what they need. Then they put a Post-it on their mirror. They put it in their phone as a reminder. It's on the front of the refrigerator. They write it somewhere where that they're going to see it all the time, but they also say it in their head, right? So we do this together because if you think about it, your thoughts are I always give this example of like the Daytona 500. right?
Yeah.
So these cars go around in a circle like 500 times over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And your thoughts and behavior are very similar to that.
Mhm.
So I tell my patients, do you brush your teeth the same way every single day? The
Mhm.
same motion, right? I do. I don't even think about it. It's like the same like routine.
Yeah.
I drive the same way to school to drop my kids off, or the same way to my office every day. It's almost
Mhm.
autopilot. These behaviors, you lace your shoes and tie them the same way.
Mhm. Yeah.
So these are behaviors, physical behaviors that we do in our life that are very subconscious and second nature to us, right?
Mhm.
So it's no different with our reactions and our feelings.
Mhm.
So it's the same, it's breaking that Daytona 500 race in your mind. So it's changing our response to some of the feelings that we're having.
Mhm.
And that takes time. So the mantra helps you create a new pathway,
Yeah.
a new thought process, and a way to change behavior. Now, once we do that, you can change behavior, whether it be in some cases, I need to lower my inflammatory markers, or I want to lose weight. I need to raise these types of minerals or macronutrients in my diet. It can be that type of change, or it can be an actual behavior change of mental health.
Yeah.
But that allows you the transition to move towards actual lifelong change and behavior change.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. I love how it's just such a comprehensive approach that you're taking with people. I mean, it's not just like all this mindset work and nutrition and just a little bit of everything. I mean, it's so key, right? Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we're like, tell me the diet, tell me what to eat, or it's like this thing that I have, but it's so much about who we are, how we show up, and
And there is a big piece of, people do ask me that, right? People want to know the diet. Initially, that's why people come to me, right? Because I'm a dietitian. So, but I think the thought of what a dietitian does is changing. And I think that it's not just writing meal plans, because I don't write meal plans. That's not the practitioner I am.
Yeah.
But I will tell you how to increase your metabolic health and increase your overall wellness. And if you want to lose weight, we can lose it in a very healthy, lifelong, habitual way.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how to balance your hormones by eating. So there are definitely key things that I focus on with my patients that are food related, because as you know, food is like the number one thing that metabolizes hormones, that makes them active in our bodies, that secretes hormones. It's the foundation for hormones, is proper nutrition. And so educating people on that is really like the step 3, 4, right? Once we understand what's happening with our behavior and why you're feeling the way you're feeling, that's baseline. Then we can make those big changes that will actually change the way you're feeling. Because that's the overall goal, right?
Yeah.
I want to feel better.
Yeah.
And it just,
they really want the diet because it will make them feel, as they believe it makes them feel, a certain way.
Exactly. And people want a sense of control. Like people don't, and I've learned this, they don't want to feel out of control. Like I always say, you need to make sure that you're controlling your life so your life isn't controlling you. Because at the end of the day, when you go to bed at night, if you feel like life just led you through the day and you had no control and you had no responsibility in your choices, that's a crummy way to go to bed at night. So it's taking back ownership and control of your life. And that's through these behavior change models that I work with my patients with.
Yeah. Wow. So, you kind of touched on a little bit, you and I were chatting before about these, intense feelings people may feel when they come in. And then you touched on like having high inflammatory markers, high cortisol. Can you kind of explain, right? Because, we're talking about burnout in the podcast, and just, I know what somebody might hear the word burnout and not necessarily and maybe think stressed out, but they don't necessarily relate the inflammation and high cortisol and things like that. Could you touch on that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to look at it from two different kind of pathways here. Like we can talk cortisol, blood sugar, right? And then we can talk gut health.
Yeah.
And really at the end of the day, they can come together as
Mhm.
one, piece of harmony.
Yeah.
But, for the sake of really making it simple for people to understand, is that cortisol is your stress hormone, which
Mhm.
this, and we don't want high stress hormones throughout our entire day. There's a time and
Yeah.
place for cortisol to be high,
Mhm.
but cortisol shouldn't be high when we're going to bed at night. Cortisol
Yeah.
shouldn't spike in the middle of the night because blood sugar spikes in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
So what this does is this consistent high amount of cortisol in the body creates a high amount of blood sugar that kind of circulates throughout the bloodstream as well.
Mhm.
And what ends up happening is because your body essentially gets exhausted from trying to rid the body of blood sugar, because the pancreas is working overtime, right? To secrete
Yeah.
insulin.
Yeah.
Insulin essentially takes that glucose, which this, out of the bloodstream and puts it into the cells and the organs that require the most attention.
Mhm.
So eventually, if you're in this high fight or flight consistently for long bouts of time, you're going to go into essentially kind of either a burnout phase, adrenal
Mhm.
fatigue, HPA phase. This HPA axis becomes dysfunctioned, which I know is your world right now,
Yeah.
Lori. And you end up having these symptoms of whether it's chronic fatigue, where you feel like you have to nap during the middle of the day,
Mhm.
or you're not handling stress well at all, like any shift in a schedule change or
Mhm.
any kind of like disruption in your day or mood
Mhm.
creates a lot of havoc on your mental health and
Mhm.
well-being. And then you find yourself either chronically fatigued or high anxiety all day long, or you
Mhm.
pair them together. And it's like
Mhm.
both, which makes especially women incredibly vulnerable
Yeah.
and feel helpless, like they can't make changes. And that's the gerbil on the wheel approach. Now, there's a lot of other issues that come with high cortisol, but when it comes to anxiety, mental health, and sleep, those are really the foundations, or I should say, those are really the largest symptoms you find with high cortisol. And we talk a lot, my patients and I talk a lot about the importance of sleep. And when
Mhm.
cortisol is messed up and you're living in this high cortisol, high fight or flight life,
Mhm.
you're not going to be sleeping well. And the foundation to good health is sleep,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
you can eat every vegetable and all the fiber and you can run your heart out. But if you're not
Mhm.
sleeping at night, it's only going to spike your cortisol even more, putting you
Mhm.
in even more feelings of burnout, anxiety, depression, and helplessness.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So that's the
And
cortisol piece.
okay, I was gonna say on the gut health part. Mhm.
Then as we transition into gut health, we've all heard that fancy term gut brain axis. It's been around for, I mean, ever. I feel like I've heard,
Mhm.
listened and learned about it. But there's so much literature and so many studies showing the importance of the kind of the harmony between the two, the balance between the two, because you can't have one without the other, right? If you were
Mhm.
to separate those two systems, Lori, and you have your brain up here and your gut down here, they are not going to function,
Yeah.
because everything that happens in your gut is told to happen because of your brain.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen without your brain telling you, please secrete bile acids to break down my food. If the brain didn't tell the stomach to do that, the stomach wouldn't secrete bile acids. So there's a lot of correlation between mental health and gut brain access because
Mhm.
of this kind of circular approach to nutrients and and gut microbes. So the gut
Mhm.
flora in the body, which is so huge right now. Like there's so much literature talking about the gut flora, the gut microbes. They're all,
Mhm.
you kind of can use interchangeable terms with these.
Yeah.
But when you start to look at gut health, and this is really a big thing with controlling anxiety and depression through controlling a healthy gut flora and food. So that obviously my patients and I work a lot
Mhm.
at creating good gut health.
Mhm.
And the reason I do that is because we can be eating all the good foods that we want, but if they're not being absorbed into our bodies appropriately, those vitamins, that good bacteria, the macro and micronutrients won't make their way to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening a lot of times is if it's not making their way to the brain, we end up having IBS symptoms. There's some leaky gut issues, which is basically particles of food that seep out through the intestines, and your body attacks it like it's a foreign object, because it's like, whoa, there's not supposed to be like bits of apples and potatoes in my bloodstream.
Right.
If that ends up happening, what will happen in the gut is cytokines kind of rush in, which is like the inflammatory cell. That's what a cytokine is. And it ends up rushing in, and inflammation goes massively high in the gut. And so that is where the inflammatory markers start to rise. So as inflammation starts to rise, that's all that inflammation, all the cytokines are making their way up to the brain as well, because the gut axis is correlated. And so with increased inflammatory markers, increased cytokine development, and let me back up for a second and say 90% of serotonin, that happy hormone, is made in the gut. So with increased inflammatory markers and decreased micro and macronutrient absorption, the decrease in serotonin will also happen. Right. So you're going to feel less happy because of this
because of this inflammation that's going on in the gut.
So then all this inflammation goes up to the brain, and it creates an inflammatory response in the brain as well, triggering the burnout feelings. So really having the foundation of your diet be focused on good gut health is a great way to start approaching a reduction in anxiety and depression-like tendencies.
So what would be, you started to lean into it. I was just thinking that what would be some practicals if somebody's listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm having a lot of these mental, health. I'm angry all the time. I'm depressed, things like that. And they've never heard of this brand new. What are like just some little things that they can start doing, to start feeling a little bit better?
So right off the bat, I would say evaluating how well you're sleeping being the number one thing that we do. For your gut health and for your mental health, right? So if you're getting upwards of 7 to 8 hours of good sleep, you're doing great. You should feel good about that. Now, there are people in this world, that don't sleep well, but also don't have the luxury. People with new babies, women with new babies, like that sleep is disrupted, and you're not going to get that beautiful 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night until all your kids just start sleeping wonderfully. And so I would advise maybe an earlier bedtime. I would advise naps when you can, even 20 to 30 minute power naps, like a siesta in the middle of the afternoon. And just trying to get a little bit of rest in during the day if you're not sleeping at night. And really, we all should be doing that, quite honestly. Like, we all should be taking a moment of silence through the day, whether it be that we sit on the couch or we just rest our eyes. It's 20 or 30 minutes. It really allows for cortisol to kind of start to slow down in our bodies if it is already high. But it also allows mental relief, which we don't give ourselves enough, especially in the Western world. I do think that, outside of starting to talk about pre and probiotics, I think that that's definitely something we do and can do, but just getting more fiber in your diet, right? More of all those good fruits and vegetables, but also a variety. So the more foods and the variety of foods you eat, that means that you're basically giving your gut all these different nutrients, feeding all the different gut microbes, which that's exactly what the gut needs. It wants. If you only eat carrots for the rest of your life, then your carrot gut microbe would be strong, but then no other gut microbe would be. So creating a good variety. And that's where, like, a lot of these diets right now, whether it be the carnivore diet or the ketogenic diet. Now, there's a lot of really good science with some of these. And unfortunately, a lot of the science is done on men, not women. So that could be a whole nother podcast in itself, Lori. So I won't dive into that today, but some of these diets that eliminate big food groups, this is a disadvantage, right? For your microbes.
Mhm.
So I do advise listeners, if you are on these types of diets, to at least cycle through and not be consistently. If you're dedicated and you're a dedicated keto dieter, I think there are some benefits with that. I think you need to seek either somebody in the professional world to kind of educate you, especially if you're a woman, on when you should be keto and when you shouldn't be. But also cycling in good fibers for your gut health. So sleep and fiber, and then eating regularly. So consistent meals and meals you enjoy, and you can sit and slow down and eat. So your gut doesn't want you eating a big lunch in the car on the way to the next meeting. We've all been guilty of doing that. It's not ideal. We should be sitting and enjoying and mindfully eating our food. A, it enters our GI system better. B, it helps break down easier. And C, it's utilized more effectively. So those would be the three: is sleep, fiber, and consistent meals. So you're not at a calorie deprivation, right? Because that creates stress in the body. If you on a low calorie diet, or you are time restricted eating and not eating enough during those intermittent fasting times, you're going to fall into having issues with high cortisol and sleep issues as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm just, thinking of that, of women that might be going, because I feel like I hear, well, if I could just lose weight, it's like people think, well, my weight is the problem. And if I could lose weight, then my body would feel better, which maybe that's true on some component, but then we go into just a calorie deficit, right? Try to just do a calorie deficit to lose weight, and then it just causes more problems.
A lot of times you end up worse off than you started, right? Sadly, I see it more times than not. And I do blame a lot of diet culture on that mentality for women, because we struggle with being okay in our body. Right. Or we struggle being okay the size that we are. And we always feel like we need to shrink ourselves or follow the next diet, or we'll lean into that influencer on social media as some kind of guidance towards good health. But weight does not equal health. And that doesn't mean, that could mean thin or a larger body. It doesn't equal health. So hopefully over the years of helping patients, I can let them understand that through healthy eating, through healthy practice, and a good, healthy mindset, the weight does come off. Like when you start making these changes, your metabolism starts to increase and your cravings go down. So you eat so differently. Right. It changes your behavior. And again, a whole nother podcast on behavior eating, which we can do in the future. It's fascinating.
Oh my gosh, I can think of when I was like in my when I was in nursing school. My gosh, I ate like crap. I gained so much weight. I want to say, I don't know how much weight I gained in those 2 years. It was a lot, but even it was about 30 pounds overall. And from, when I started college, my sophomore year, I was probably in like the best shape, but I was over exercising, under eating. And then I stopped playing volleyball, and and I was in nursing school, and I went on birth control in the middle of it. And I gained,
you just had the hurricane.
Oh yeah. And I gained like 30 pounds. It was off. I think I weighed more than I did like 9 months pregnant with both my kids.
Well, and then looking at that, Lori, in addition, yes, you might have been eating more and exercising less, but your stress level was so much higher. Right? So it made it really difficult for you to utilize the food well, because you were in constant fight or flight of not sleeping and studying, crazy schedule and working and whatever else you were doing in life.
Yeah, exactly. You're such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, this is just an awesome conversation. I feel like, again, we could keep talking and talking. So, But yeah, just for time's sake purposes. Okay. So you gave us some takeaways. So what if somebody's hearing this and obviously, wants to, get connected with you and work with you? You kind of talked about the type of woman that you work with earlier and how you do, and maybe just touch on that again and like how they could get connected with you, if that's something that they'd like to do.
Yeah. So if you're somebody that's struggling with, anxiety, sleep, skin, GI issues, and just like overall feeling satisfied with yourself as a person, like whether it be health or wellness and mental health, I do advise you, if it's not me, it can be somebody else close to you. It doesn't have to be me, but making sure that you reach out to somebody that's within the field of women's health and functional health, because it's a whole body approach. Maybe get some labs, some functional labs that can help you understand what's actually happening in your body, because that's a great way for us to start treating, is to know actual numbers if you have any deficiencies, and which I know that you do a lot of as well, Lori. And then if you were to reach out to me, I'll send all my contact to you, Lori. You can put it in the show notes too. But you can find me on Instagram, Rachel_Hicks_RD. And then I'm contracted through a clinic here in Jacksonville, Florida, Altogether Wellness.
Awesome. Okay. So can they work just with you, or would they be working with the practitioner?
Yeah, so they can work just with me, but they have the option that we do labs at our clinic as well. We have a medicine provider there as well. So if you are in the area, I also see people that aren't in Florida. So
awesome. Okay. So it's virtual. Yeah. They can be outside. Got it. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. Yeah. And I think we need to have more. I'm like, there's so many tangents that we could go off on and talk more on this subject.
I told you when we first started, I try to keep it like, for me, not going out into like 4 different directions, because I can really geek out on all of this stuff. So
yes, no. And I think it's obvious, like you're, like I said, you're such a wealth of knowledge. I know that people will get so much value out of this. So, and have you guested on other podcasts? Like, I'm just thinking that, somebody wants to find more about you.
Yeah, I've guessed, but I can actually send those to you too, if you want to add those. But
would they be on your website? Maybe, do you have a website?
Yes, they will be. And if you go under altogetherwellness.com, you'll find all my information as well. No, excuse me, altogetherwellness.net.
Okay.
You'll find all they can find my information and show links there.
Okay. And we'll link that in the show notes too for here. Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thanks, Lori. This was fun.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Take care.